No excuses. When you're the boss, you can't blame the boss. And I've always found I don't like people who complain when what they're complaining about is in their control. So I've felt that way since I was probably 16 years old. If I wanted to start on the football team, right, that was performance, right? That's up to me. And the coach will see it. And starting a company at, let's say, whatever, a young age, working your way up isn't about politics in my mind. It's not about that. It's about taking responsibility and figuring out how to get better to hit goals. That's it. And when you're the captain or the coach or the team leader, the president, the CEO, whatever, you really don't have any excuse, right? Your results are yours. You hired the people, you gave them the resources or not, you gave them the direction or not, coaching or not, and at the end of the day, the EBITDA number, the sales growth, that's up to you.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Hey, entrepreneurs. Today we have the privilege of sitting down with Rich Wilson, who's the president and CEO of Paul Davis Restoration. I also have the privilege of having worked with Rich for a number of years in CertaPro, and John and Rich and I all have common backgrounds. So, Rich, to start us off, can you talk to us a little bit about your leadership philosophy that you have come to develop over the course of your time leading people?
I don't know that anyone's ever asked me about my philosophy. I look at leadership as a skill. I don't believe people are born leaders. I believe you can develop leadership skills. And I think that's a big reason the three of us probably are so akin to trying to build leaders, because that's what we did at College Pro at a very young age. Uh, so I've always my best to ensure that anybody that's going to work with me, that I try to impart whatever I've learned about leadership in my past. And if I had to say a philosophy in terms of what the focus is, first it would be an assertive focus. Like leaders, frankly, leaders lead. And when your leadership is necessary, you think, your gut says it's necessary. So you need to be assertive in the way you apply those leadership skills. And two, I think an important leadership skill, I think, is active listening. Like truly trying to understand without judging, which by the way is hard for me, but really try to understand where the other person is and meet them where they are. So that would be my philosophy.
Yeah, I love that, Rich. And Rich asked your leadership philosophy. Does your leadership philosophy differ from your philosophy of how entrepreneurs need to be? And what is your philosophy around that? Or is that kind of the same practice in terms of active listening and being assertive in your skill development?
Oh, certainly. A business owner has to lead. In fact, I would argue that regardless of what your service or product is, you're going to recruit certainly different competencies. But at the end of the day, you have to create the team, create the vision, build the team rather, and make sure that team is aligned with you on whatever journey you're taking them to or through.
So, Rich, if we take just the leadership and entrepreneurial philosophies we just talked about, right? We all grew up from the same cloth in terms of our leadership development with College Pro back in the day and up through those ranks.
Sure.
At what moments, or give us a couple of moments in time in your leadership development where becoming a leader or becoming an entrepreneur became really real to you? And what was those moments if you reflect back?
Boy. So I'll give you one that I tell this story a lot, and people who have heard it will roll their eyes. But I was probably, I don't know, 23, and were great. I was kicking butt as a very small entrepreneur, and I worked with a team. And the leader of that, I wasn't actually the leader of that team. The leader of that team was a guy by the name of Charlie Chase, who was probably 28 or 29. And he brought me into his office once, and I thought he was gonna, I don't know, promote me, give me a bonus, do something nice, pat me on the back. And so I sit down and I'm ready for praise because my numbers were great. And he said, Rich, everybody in this office and on this team hates you. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, or he said, you're being a, I'll just say it, you're being a prick, right? Treat people with respect, listen to them, all that kind of good stuff. And I'll never forget that because it's not just about performance, because that performance will not be long lasting unless your team's behind you. So I've tried to be less of a prick over the last 30, 34 more years.
When we look at assertive focus, my understanding of assertive, which may have very well have come from you, is assertive is about putting your reality on the table. Everything you know, everything you don't know, everything you feel, everything you're making assumptions about, and then inviting the other person to put their reality on the table as well. So, first of all, I want to check in with you on, are we aligned on what an assertive focus is? And then, assuming, feel free to correct that with your understanding, but assuming we are, what are some obstacles to leaders being assertive that you've observed?
Okay. First of all, definition of assertive, that was well said. I like that, Rich. Yeah, assertive is putting your reality on the table, and that takes courage. So that's important. And the difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness is that you actually really do want to hear where the other person may be coming from. And you're not shoving your reality down their throats. So the question was, what are some of the obstacles? One of the obstacles is fear, right? It's the fear of not bringing out an issue that needs to be put on the table. They might hurt their feelings. They might quit. That's why I use the word courage. Yeah, you should. If it's important and you're nervous, great. It's important. And if you're nervous about it, it's probably really important. So it needs to be put on the table, and you need to be able to listen to where the other person is.
And with the franchise owners that you lead in your system, what do you find they could use most when it comes to leadership that just may not be obvious to them or they may struggle with?
Geez, I've worked with thousands upon thousands of franchise owners, and everyone's different.
If you had to pick a through line, if you said, you know what, gosh, if I could wave a magic wand and every franchise owner were just to do this, I bet it would move the bar for a bunch of them. What would that be?
It would be effectively recruiting the best people, holding standards very high in regards to competency for whatever role and values alignment. And then we use a thing called caliper, which I know you guys are familiar with, and preferences that suit the role. The biggest mistake people tend to make is hiring somebody when the need arises, and if they look good, smell good, the interview's okay, they hire them. And I have found that when you take the proper amount of responsible time to do your due diligence on somebody, at the end of the day, you're going to do a lot better performance wise. Period. That's it. So be recruiting the right people.
We've had a number of people on the podcast who have said, be slow to hire and quick to fire. Seems like an easy enough quip to rip off. What we've also observed, though, is people can be slow to hire, but then they're also slow to fire. And there's a little bit of ego involved. There's a little bit of pride involved to admit that somebody made a hiring mistake. Have you ever made a hiring mistake, or can you tell a story about maybe someone else who's made a hiring mistake? And what was the length of that? Was the hire held on too long, too short? I just love to hear a story from you about reflecting on the idea of being quick to fire when you know it's time to do that.
Sure. Everyone makes hiring mistakes, and everyone generally says, I should have done it. I'm thinking of a certain instance where it's interesting. Quick story. So when I hired Caliper for that whole profile thing 20 years ago, Rich, the PhD that sold me on it said, hey, give me your whole team and I'll do a caliper on them. I'll do a caliper on you, and then we'll get back together in a couple days, and I'm going to go through and tell you what you like about these people and what you don't like about these people without ever meeting them, right? And he knocked it out of the park, like nailed it. There was one person, he said, though, I don't get this person, based on a test that they took, right? I don't think you like this person at all, and I think you're going to fire him, aren't you? And he nailed it.
Wow.
And I was new to the position at the time, and I had been just trying to give this person as many chances as possible. And really, what I was doing was delaying his career. It was a him, his career, and he knew darn I was like. So he was not only did he have to stay on the job and not get another better job, but he had to live with the knowledge, the misery that Rich didn't like him. And that sucks. So I think you're hurting the other person as much as you think you might be helping them by giving them a chance. By waiting, it's just misery for everybody involved.
Did you hire the sales rep for Caliper?
I didn't, but we did hire, I won't name the name, we did hire somebody from California, yes.
Because that's a good presentation in my book, right?
Pretty good.
That's when you know you got a good rep. And for those who don't know, your Caliber is a personality-based test. Is that correct? I haven't used it, but obviously you guys have been using it for 20 years, where you can get an understanding of the profile of a candidate and their strengths and areas of opportunity, right? And so for those who don't know, a lot of companies use different personality tools to really evaluate candidates that fit the role. Like one thing you said is not only do you have high standards, that they also have values alignment, but the preferences match the role. And with the Caliber, you can assign what preferences are important to you in your business, and it can work that way. So I love that. And Rich, as you asked that question, I was thinking to myself the same, how would I answer the question you asked Rich in terms of an experience where, I held on to somebody too long? And Rich said it exactly the way I felt it, which is, you always usually regret it, holding the one for too long. And you think you're doing a good deed. You think you're doing good to Johnny, right? Let's keep Johnny around a little bit longer. Maybe it will work, whatever. And inevitably, you have an ethical responsibility, Rich. I love the way you put that, of letting Johnny move on and not keeping him in a role or her in a role that's just not working for them and delaying their career. We have ethical responsibilities as entrepreneurs and leaders. And the biggest piece for me, I don't know if this ever happened to you, Rich, but no good deed goes unpunished. Anytime I've ever tried to think I'm doing the right thing by keeping something longer, it bites me in the butt somehow. Has that ever happened to you?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a part that drives me nuts through all of this. And I'm curious, you said something about the proper amount of time to recruit an individual and do it right. How long do you take in your hiring practice, and what's that process look like?
If I could do these two things in 2 days, I could hire somebody in 2 days. It's difficult though, because here are the two, actually it would be three things. One, I have to take some sort of personality test. I think that's really important. It's objective. It's not always a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's never a thumbs up, 100%, and we're good at all. But that needs to get done, and I'm going to need at least two other people that I trust to interview them other than myself. So 3 people interview them. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, I need to get them in a social situation around people other than myself, and then talk to the other people afterwards. For example, in franchising, we have the things called Discovery Day. And during Discovery Day, the franchisees come in, or the candidates come in, everybody presents and all that kind of good stuff. And then we take them out for dinner. And the corporate people leave, and our current franchisees that we invite to the dinner hang out. We had breakfast with the franchisees that hung out with them, and we find out how they did socially. Because it's not FDD stuff, right? So I can swear. I have a no asshole policy. You can have the best caliper in the world. You can have the greatest resume, highest performance. The story I told you about Charlie. Yeah, your numbers can be great, but if you're a jerk, I don't want you on my team. So you find out very quickly if somebody's a jerk. That's when their guard's down, whether it's a drink or two, that doesn't really matter. But get somebody comfortable and you'll find out who they are. I think that's
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool the story you shared earlier about Charlie, right? Because you probably wouldn't hire the 23-year-old self, and I don't know if I'd hire the 23-year-old self of myself either, the more I think about it.
right.
But it's funny that 360 and how you've evolved as a leader back to you focusing on your skills in an assertive manner and being an active listener and growing through that process. What do you recommend? What ends up happening though is sometimes those individuals who aren't a culture fit do well at dinner for a variety of reasons,
Sure.
come into the organization and then aren't a good fit, but they're producing. And that's usually a very tough situation for an entrepreneur, right? Where I think we used to call them mavericks back in our language, right?
Yep.
High performer, not a good culture fit. How do you suggest entrepreneurs handle those types of situations? Do you still get rid of them as quickly as possible, even though they're your top sales rep? Like, how do you suggest that being handled?
Easy to say, hard to do. Get rid of them immediately. Really hard to say when they're knocking it dead performance wise. And you can rationalize that the salesperson, so they're only like at some meetings, right? Or they don't really affect our culture, but they're knocking it dead on the numbers. That has always come back to bite me. And it's hard, but I would say if you got somebody that's truly not a culture fit, that when they're in a meeting with the team, like this is a team, right? And people cringe. Unfortunately, I would say get rid of them immediately. And I know it's hard, not
Yeah.
easy.
So, for those who didn't see the title and the description, we're talking today with Rich Wilson, and Rich is the president and CEO of Paul Davis Restoration, a very large franchising company in the United States. Rich, how many franchises do you guys have?
354.
Yeah, so 354 covering all of the US, I think Canada as well, or
Yeah.
just in the US?
No, Canada as well.
So all of North America. And then prior to that was for longer than a decade, the CEO and president of CertaPro Painters. So 20 years as being a president and CEO in this business. And somebody who started off as an entrepreneur as well. You started within the organization out of college and kind of grew all the way to this point, working your way through the ranks of an organization as well. And we have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this conversation and or entrepreneurs who have entrepreneurs in their organization that they want to someday maybe run their business. What are some of the key traits that you, Rich, as you were growing through the organization, had to really put on display, learn, and prove yourself that, hey, someday I can run this very large organization?
I think if you're going to lead an organization, you have to look at it as your own. And I do own a small percentage of Paul Davis. So I have equity, but I'm not the majority stakeholder. So I'm not an entrepreneur. And certainly I'm an employee with equity. But the reason I've been given the opportunity to lead the teams that I've led is because I thought of the company as mine, right? A lot of people talk about work-life balance. I don't think of work and personal life any differently. I certainly go on vacation and all that kind of good stuff. But at the end of the day, we have to do $115 million in sales this month. I know that we ended at 113 and we have some reconciling to do, and we're going to get to 115, damn it. And if I have to make some calls this weekend, I will. So I can't think of any specific traits other than to treat the company that you work for as your own and care about it just as much.
Yeah. It's a critical trait because a lot of individuals want to be given the role before they start treating it a different way. And I think maybe to rephrase what you're saying in terms of look at the business as if it's your own, you didn't just start doing that when you became the president and CEO.
No.
You started doing that 30 years ago when you were in the business,
Yep.
showing the leadership that you cared as much about this business as if you owned the business. And you started treating it like you were the sole entrepreneur in that business, willing to be the chef, chief cook and bottle washer, willing to do whatever you needed to do to really have this business experience success. And we're talking to the CEO and president of $1 billion+ corporation here, who's proven that throughout the time. And I think that's a great message to entrepreneurs. But let me flip that now the other way.
Mhm.
Now that you are the CEO and president of this very large corporation, What are some of the key traits that you need to display week in, week out to continue to move your organization forward?
Basic stuff. If you're going to proselytize being assertive and actually listening to people, then you better be assertive and you better listen to people. No one likes a hypocrite. So I would say living the vision, mission, and values, knowing your darn numbers, right? For example, if Rich, you and I were talking on the phone, and he said, "Hey, how'd you do this month?" And I might say, "Oh, pretty good." And then you might say, "What were the sales?" And I don't know the answer to that. Then I don't know what the hell's going on in my company. What'd you make? What was the EBITDA goal? Right? How about the NPS? What was that? And what did you learn from some of that feedback? So you've got to be plugged in, you've got to be engaged. And if you expect your people to know something, then you better know what you should know, if that makes sense.
Rich, how do you know when somebody's ready for more responsibility? Either looking at it as a franchise owner or an entrepreneur, you have a staff of people, and how do you know who's the one who's ready for more? Or even in considering your own staff, I'm assuming you would be looking at same things as an entrepreneur would. Who's ready for more responsibility? How do you identify them?
Results in whatever their role is, have they consistently achieved results and not just gotten lucky 1 year? So consistent results and the aspiration to want more. I don't talk people into taking more unless I think they want it. And finally, this is where people butt up sometimes against the Peter principle, whatever you want to call it. The ability to problem solve on your own. In caliper speak, that's abstract reasoning. That's having the wherewithal to not have to call your boss to say, "What do you think I should do?" Now, that's not to say that you couldn't get feedback, but the better call to me is, "Hey, Rich, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think?" Versus, "What do you want me to do?" So that's pretty much it. I have made way too many mistakes in my past by next man up. I call them battlefield commissions. Well, that guy got fired, and that guy was like the second in command, right? All right, hire that guy or gal, right? And that I have hurt people by doing that, by putting them in a position they were not ready for before too soon. And then that hurts them as well as the organization.
So, three things I heard from you was consistent results, they want more responsibility, and the ability to problem solve on their own. I remember a conversation you and I had that must have been 10 or 12 years ago that you had shared with me that you knew that you had always wanted to be president of a company. And I'm curious about that in light of you looking at wanting more responsibility. You knew what you wanted from a young age, that you wanted to run a company. What was it about running a company that you were confident you wanted? And how were you clear like that at a young age?
No excuses. When you're the boss, you can't blame the boss. And I've always found I don't like people who complain when what they're complaining about is in their control. So I've felt that way since I was probably 16 years old. If I wanted to start on the football team, right, that was performance, right? That's up to me. And the coach will see it. And starting a company at, let's say, whatever, a young age, working your way up isn't about politics in my mind. It's not about that. It's about taking responsibility and figuring out how to get better to hit goals. That's it. And when you're the captain or the coach or the team leader, the president, the CEO, whatever, you really don't have any excuse, right? Your results are yours. You hired the people, you gave them the resources or not, you gave them the direction or not, coaching or not, and at the end of the day, the The EBITDA number, the sales growth, that's up to you.
So I'm hearing you from a young age loved the idea of taking your destiny in your own hands and the destiny of a company in your own hands, and just the whole idea of you're going to rise and fall based on your own skill and get your own learning lessons. If you were running that company, and neat enough, you've been doing it for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Having been in one of the companies that you've run, I can tell you one of the things I find you particularly talented at is communicating a vision and doing that in a way where people are confident about the vision that you communicate. Can you break down that? I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with what is a vision and how do I communicate it and how do I enroll people to get behind a vision? And I've experienced you being talented at it, and I'd like to hear more about how you do it and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'll say there are four things that I feel are critical to getting a team focused and aligned, right? Number one, they need to know the vision, right? That's who are we and what do we stand for? That's how I define vision. It's not a number goal. It's who we are and what we stand for. How are we going to do it? Values. Hey, what matters to us? What do you have to portray every day or live by every day? Do your best to live by every day. Um, and then finally, a goal, right? Okay, where are we going in 5 years? And what has to happen this year in order to get there in 5 years? So, what's funny, Rich, when I started at CertaPro Painters, we were doing 50 million bucks. And I stood up in front of my first conference of 200 people or however many people it was. And I said, we're going to be a $500 million company. And I almost got laughed out of the room. Literally, people were laughing, booing. So that was nice. They didn't boo me, but they were laughing. And what are they going to do this year? 780, Rich? Something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it worked. But okay, so that makes for entrepreneurs or anybody leading a company, I think the vision, mission, values, and goal really important. And the vision, especially, needs to be one, memorable. So our vision is to provide extraordinary care while serving people in their time of need. I can remember that, right? So it needs to be memorable. It needs to be impactful. Meaning when somebody reads that's not in your company, goes, huh, provide extraordinary care, not just fixing stuff, but extraordinary care, like better than anybody, while serving. I like to help people, and we attract people that like to help people, by the way. And we're going to help people in their time of need. That's pretty honorable. That's awesome. And if it can be memorable, impactful, it's got a shot at being inspiring. And we'll
Gosh,
tell you,
even your description of that,
right.
the way you even described that is inspiring. There's something about how you use your voice and your confidence in how you communicate. There are probably a whole bunch of people that could rattle off that vision that you did, but your unique ability to really, in your belief of what you're saying, I think communicates volumes. I was inspired just listening to you right there.
Thank you. But yeah, I guess actually I didn't mention it, but yeah, you need to believe it yourself. If you don't believe it yourself, what's the point? I can't imagine any of the entrepreneurs that put their whole net worth and their house and family on the line don't believe in what they're doing. I would hope they believe in what they're doing.
But just to interject though, Rich, a lot of entrepreneurs believe in themselves, but they don't as passionately deliver and fulfill on the promise of their vision and their values and standing behind the mission and being accountable to the goals and delivering so that the team not only hears the inspiration but believes the inspiration. I think that's what Rich has just extracted out of you that I think was wonderful.
No, that's cool. And on the hiring thing, there's not anyone on my team that doesn't inspire me in some way. Like, I wish I could be like Brad Cowan. I wish I could be as gregarious as Brad Cowan. I wish I could be as disciplined as Mike Hopkins. Right? I can go right through my team. And it's not humility, by the way. I'm as arrogant as the next guy. But I don't think I could be the chief revenue officer like Brad can. I don't think I could be the chief operating officer like Mike. Mike's a better chief operating officer than I ever was. You know what I mean? So I try to let my team do what they do best and stay out of their way. And
Yeah.
I am really proud of Mike Stone because Mike Stone took over for me 15, no, not 15, 9 years ago in 2015. And he's done a great job. And I think that's great.
You know, I think one of the things I liked your breakdown of the vision of know the vision, the mission, the values, and the goal, but you just demonstrated maybe a fifth thing, which is to know your people and to know what is an extraordinary talent that each person has, that you genuinely believe in them, that you genuinely admire them, that they genuinely inspire you. There's got to be something to you knowing that about people and that you believe in them. Then it's like vision, mission, values, goal. Because I think we could throw away vision, mission, values, goal if you didn't believe in people or people didn't feel honored or respected by you. So I feel like you just exemplified a fifth without having highlighted it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Hey, Rich, I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think it comes on top. I think it's like that old selling 10 plus 1 we had. It's like you get your 4 plus 1. But
Yeah,
if you can,
right,
but if you can
right.
deliver all of those, knowing who your team is, to your point, if the vision is going to be inspirational enough, is it's going to take them to a place that you want to lead them or they want to go, right? If you know them well enough, you're not going to design a vision that they don't care about either. I think it's that plus 1 that's all encompassing in all of those. So I think it's fantastic. You mentioned Mike Stone there a few minutes ago, and I don't know if you know this, Rich, or not, but Mike Stone was on episode 1 of the Entrepreneurs United podcast. I think we're around 170 or so now,
Yeah.
going on our 5th season. So he was on episode 1, and it's great. Mike worked with you. We talked a lot about his entrepreneurial journey, and I know he still wants a rematch on pickleball court, the next Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience in Charleston. So you got to watch out for that.
And
But
John, did you notice he also mentioned Mike Hopkins, who's also a former podcast
that's
guest?
true. That's true. We did have Mike on as well. So, Rich, it's about time you get here. So, thanks for coming. When you talk about, we talked a lot about it. Just want to hit on Mike for a second, maybe Mike Hopkins as well, maybe both of them. You mentioned earlier finding the right roles for people and getting the right pieces. We all come from the same cloth, if you will, in terms of some of our upbringing and mentorship and training and all that kind of stuff. And you mentioned Charlie a little bit earlier, but now you're a mentor and mentoring others and have mentored a lot of people that have moved on to some phenomenal things. What is a big key in addition to what we've talked about here, and in addition to like the active listening and the assertiveness, that is a key component of mentorship that you've experienced and now you are providing?
Mentorship. I would say sometimes less is more, and guidance. You find that opportunity to say something that is meaningful. I think especially new leaders or even new entrepreneurs could have all the money in the world, smartest people in the world. But if you don't let your people do their job and let them run a little bit and give them a chance to succeed and give them a chance to fail on their own terms, you could actually hurt them. And I'm not looking to mentor or make anybody Rich Wilson. Because I tried to be Charlie Chase for a while and it doesn't work. I'm not that tall. But you do have to give people enough rope and you have to let them fail. And I think as a mentor, it's when they fail that you can lift them up, right?
Yeah.
Give them a little bit more confidence and maybe say something they'll remember. Or maybe do something they'll remember. I remember, you guys know the name Chris Drucker, right? Rich, you do.
Yep.
He was my first external hire from University of Pennsylvania in 1989. And he was having a hard time hitting his marketing goal in the spring. And he was in finals or I don't know what. So what I did, I went out and put up 20 lawn signs for him in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, just for the hell of it. I'm like, hey, Chris, I got your lawn signs up. You're good. He'll never forget that. right? And even today, I bet you he remembers that. So, like little things, whether it's a word of encouragement or a phrase of encouragement, a story, or an action, as long as it's meaningful and well meant, that's mentoring.
That's a phenomenal message to all entrepreneurs and people that are mentoring people, leaders, everybody alike. And Rich, a lot of times on the Entrepreneurs United podcast, we have business advisors and coaches and professionals or authors of books or people that have a message and potentially even a product or service to help entrepreneurs grow. And then sometimes we have entrepreneurs like yourself who are running companies all day, every day. And the opportunity to get this download from you. We joked when we started that Rich and I had a blank sheet of paper. Now I got like this massive scrolling list on my notepad of incredible notes. And I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And we certainly got a little bit of that in Austin last year at the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience. I know you're coming to Charleston again this year, and a really good small commercial for that as well. And coming to that event, getting to spend time with you last year was a treat for me because we hadn't spent a lot of time physically together, and I wish we would have had more. But I can't wait to see you again this September in Charleston, and hope other entrepreneurs come join us there. And I guess in part, thank you again for coming on with us today and sharing your messages with us.
Very good. Good seeing you guys.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
John, in addition to having a conversation with Rich, which I always learn something from, I love how he stitched together this vision, mission, values, and goal. And I also love how then he exemplified what I pointed out when we were on with him, which is really knowing and honoring his people. I think there's a bit of secret sauce to that, that if an entrepreneur can't find something that they appreciate or value or admire in an individual working in the business, you have to ask yourself, are they actually all that talented at what they're doing?
Yeah. Well, Rich, you had the unique opportunity to work with Rich. I never worked with him inside an organization before. And right when you asked him, hey, having worked with you, here's something that I noticed about your skills in terms of his ability to communicate a vision and get a whole team behind it. I was literally going to ask you, one of my next questions was, hey, Rich, you've worked with Rich Wilson for a
Right.
while. I was going to ask you, like, what are some of the traits you saw? And you just mentioned two of them, right? You talked about the vision and rolling a team, and then how well he gets to know his team. Are there others? I mean, what other types of leadership skills did
Mm.
you experience from which Rich Wilson that maybe you grabbed a piece or two from?
You know what's interesting is at the Entrepreneurs United experience last year, he and I had the opportunity to sit next to each other on the bus. And I had reminded him of an experience that I had with him many years ago where he made it very clear a decision that was being discussed that we were not going to move forward in that particular direction. He cut the conversation off rather early. And I shared with him, at the time, I thought that wasn't great. I thought, like, it was, you didn't listen to people. And he said, listening, right? Like, and I said, you know what I've come to learn over the course of me becoming more mature as a leader myself is that you're just not open, just say so. Just if you're the decision maker and you're just not open to going in a particular direction, it is not respecting people to allow that conversation to continue going on because it'll never go there. And if that's the case, just say so up front. So I think Rich has all these small things that he has unconscious competence in how he leads in a values oriented, respectful way that for me, I actually misinterpreted that demonstration of respect in that moment I reminded him of, and have now come to understand that was showing respect to that group.
Yeah. It is amazing. Like going back to the first question you asked him about his leadership philosophy. And he talked about leadership being a skill, and you have to have an assertive focus on wanting to develop that skill. And then he walked us back to the story of with Charlie and, Charlie bringing him to his office and saying, hey, kid, everybody hates you.
Yeah.
No one wants to work
Yeah.
with you. And then you talk to him today and you're like, how can you not love this guy? I want to work for him, and so he developed that skill and learned that skill through his journey. And I just love the fact that, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, you can chart your own course in terms of who the leader is that you want to be, but you have to focus and assertively focus on developing that skill set. which is kind of, one of the reasons I'd say, Rich, we record this podcast. We do it selfishly for ourselves to sharpen our saw. And we have this philosophy that if anybody listens to this, they're probably listening because they want to sharpen their saw as well and get stronger and better in their traits of leadership or entrepreneurship or whatever it may be. And I really love that angle in the first question. Be assertively, focused on developing your leadership skill sets.
You and I love remembering which podcast guest we got what from and kind of give them credit for it. I don't remember who said this. And if you remember, feel free to interrupt my flow. Somebody talked about mentoring moments, that in this era, this day and age, sometimes it's hard to find a mentor who you want to follow in every step. So find mentoring moments. Now, think about that mentoring moment in the story Rich told that Charlie said, "Hey, nobody likes you." And he said, he remembered exactly word for word how many years later. I mean, this was 20 years ago. And he said, "You're being kind of a prick."
Yeah.
What a mentoring moment that he would remember that. And now piece that together with when he was talking about the selection process. And he said, I do a personality test. I'd have 2 people who I trust do the interview with a person with me, and then have them in a social situation with others. And then he proceeded to say, we have a no asshole policy.
Yeah.
And you wonder if that would Rich have said the same thing if Charlie didn't have an assertive focus? If Charlie didn't go to Rich for that mentoring moment and give him this assertive focus and this kind of dose of reality of what other people were thinking about him, and now 20 years later, this is a staple that he thinks about, that he doesn't want to hire people who are kind of like he was at 23. He could have gone down his entire career believing results only was what mattered.
Yeah.
But it was the assertive focus of Charlie and that mentoring moment that helped evolve that particular aspect of Rich's leadership.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot there, Rich, that you just talked about. And it's also the courage for Charlie to be assertive, to your point. That's a big point. A lot of entrepreneurs have conflicts with their team members, or a lot of CEOs or leaders have conflicts with people on their team, and they never address them. They fire them one day and they're like, what happened? Well, you know what? For 3 years, I've hated the way you've done this, right? And they don't address it. And I think that's another skill set. We didn't dive into Rich about conflict management, how he handles conflict, but I best believe that he's extremely assertive in effectively managing his conflict as well through the mentorship that he received and the message. And, that mentoring moment, what it brought me to, Rich, and when you think 20 years, 30 years ago, I can remember Eric Debley with Handyman Online calling me into his office. And I'm 24 years old and this .com company is falling apart, and he lets me go. And he provided me a mentoring moment walking out the door. He's like, John, he's like, one day you'll learn that sometimes you're like a rock that goes into the water and you leave a wake in the way you send your message and things that you do. And I always had that visual in my mind of sometimes I'm too aggressive in my mannerisms, which creates a wake and affects other people. And I still to this day have that vision in my head of, if there's a situation, how am I going to manage it and manage it not too aggressively so it doesn't create the wake. But those mentoring moments are ones we always remember. I'm sure you have tons of examples as well, and they're so important. So what are we doing to make sure we provide those mentoring moments to the people we work with is very important.
Absolutely. I'll share with you one of the mentoring moments that came from one of our podcast guests with Jeff Wall, that similarly, you got relieved of your responsibility. You got fired. You got terminated from Eric Debley. Well, Jeff invited me into an interview process for a role and then turned around and didn't hire me for it, which is rare. Like, you'd think if you invite somebody to interview, they probably have the leading edge to hire him. Well, he didn't hire me. And the mentoring moment he provided me at that point was, the higher up you go in leadership, the more comfortable you have to be in the gray area. That at the time, I was way too black and white. And black and white is a very easy place to live. It's either right or it's wrong. I believe it or I don't. Turn right or turn left. And he said, the higher up you go in leadership, things are not black and white. Like, you've got to be creative in your leadership role and got to get more comfortable in the gray. And you're not as comfortable in the gray as you need to be. And that's a mentoring moment that I received, that today I can say I am more comfortable in the gray as a result of just that moment. Just that moment. And I couldn't agree with you more that I think we need to think about as entrepreneurs and leaders, are we providing these mentoring moments for the people who we lead?